Hey there, and welcome to the 5th part of the new player guide. And so this is going to be all about materia. So materia is something that I have brought up in previous videos, but I really want to expand upon that system here, because materia impacts literally every job and class in this game. And so I think that it's going to be important to raise earlier awareness rather than later, because I have noticed that a lot of people get to level 80 and they literally have never slotted a materia before. They don't even know really what it does for them or what it offers for them, and I definitely think it's totally worth checking into. So before I get into actually talking about the guide, I want to talk about what we're going to be talking about in the guide. And so this is going to cover primary stats, secondary stats, what you can expect from materia. It's going to include things like how you can slot NPCs, how you can slot the gear into the materia yourself, what overmelding is, how you can remove materia, how you can transmute materia, how you can gather and get materia essentially just from different sources in the game, and kind of everything materia, really. If this content helps you in any way and you want to show your support, I would super appreciate any likes and subscribes that you could give me. Hit that like button and absolutely decimate that subscribe button. I really don't know what I'm supposed to say here, but you know what? I'm supposed to say something about that, so decimate that subscribe button. Anyhow, let's get into it. So, if you aren't too familiar with stats, you might want to consider going back to the 4th part of the new player guides, where I do go over the stats, what a primary stat is, what a secondary stat is, what the secondary stats even offer and can do for you. So as a quick recap, secondary stats include critical hit, determination, direct hit rate, skill speed or spell speed, tenacity, and piety. All secondary stats can be slotted into gear as materia. Primary stats used to be able to, and you still can get those materia. In fact, you can still get elemental resistance materia, but primary stat materia and elemental resistance materia is useless for you. So when you are interested in getting into the materia system, the first thing that is first is that you first of all need a piece of gear. This is purely dependent on gear. This is not like there are various other games like Ion Online where you had Sigma stones, where you would put one of these stones into your character and it would give you an ability. This system is purely to do with secondary stats, and this is purely attached to specific pieces of gear rather than baked into your character. So in order to do that, you need to have a piece of gear with what we call materia slots on it. So very likely when you are first getting into this game, you aren't getting many materia slots on gear. In fact, if I'm pulling up examples like these Strider boots or Valentine Rose shoes, you can see these have no materia in them. And don't worry, this is definitely a system that you're going to see a lot more. Like you can see these goatskin leg guards, these have 2 materia in it. And likewise, this means that, hey, if you wanted 2 materia, you can slot it into that. And likewise, this is a system that continues to go on until endgame. Such as if I pull up some of my rings, or some of my accessories I should say, you can see that they have 2 materia slots on them. A lot of accessories, however, are only going to have 1 slot on them. And then if I pull up some of my armor, they have also 2 slots on them. Likewise, if I show you my Brilliance bow, this is a relic weapon, and so it's a little bit different, but you can see all the way up to 5 slots. And so that makes it so that I have a lot of customization in this weapon. And likewise, this is a feature and a system that I definitely think that a lot of people are going to enjoy, because it allows you to really customize what direction you want your character to go in. Systems such as tenacity, where you're not only increasing your own damage, but also increasing your damage resistance by a significant amount, is definitely something I can see appealing to players. Or to more DPS-oriented players, they might be interested in lowering their global cooldown or cast time to very low levels, just so that they can have a faster pace of gameplay where they're constantly volleying out spells, constantly volleying out massive damage spikes. So this leads into the next question of, okay, now we know about that, where can we actually get this materia put into my gear? So, especially for a lot of newer players, this is going to be primarily the way that they get to it. So right now, I am in the capital city of Limsa Lominsa, and I am at what the NPC is called a materia melder. Conveniently, that is literally their name. I feel kind of bad for them, but at least it shows me where to go. And so, for when I open up this screen, I can change into gear, I can change into specific armory chests such as main hand or offhand. I can change to equipped. I can, mostly for this example, I'm just going to stay in my inventory though. Likewise, when I pull this up, you can see that there is a list on the left hand side where you can see a whole bunch of different gear. Alongside of it, you can see these green slots here. These slots represent materia slots. In particular, these mean empty materia slots, and likewise you can see that even when in the tooltip for the weapon itself, like the King's Codex right now, you can see that the materia has 2 empty slots in it. So if I click this item, you see that on the right hand side I get a whole bunch of options for different materials like critical hit, determination, direct hit rate, skill speed, tenacity, PD, and GP. We'll talk about what GP is in the crafting video going in later, but I just want to get this baseline system down. I know a lot of people are going to be like, what's a GP? Don't worry. But at the bottom of here, we can see that we have available materia enhancements, and we can see critical hit, determination, spell speed, and piety. And so for this one, let's hover over that weapon, and likewise we can see critical hit and piety in it. And so instantly people are going to be like, okay, where is skill speed and where is tenacity? So this system does a little bit of I'll say it, it tries and shows you the stats that typically players aim for when they're playing this class, such as the King's Codex is going to be a Scholar's Arm. This is a weapon for a healer in the game. And so critical hit, determination, spell speed, and piety are more of its concerns. Whereas we're not so worried about things like skill speed, because this is a caster class, this is not a weapon-based, skill-based class, and so it is going to be impacted specifically by how fast its cast time is. And likewise, it's not a tank, so it's not going to gain anything from tenacity. So now let's open up this Warg Greaves of Fending, which is literally just a random drop that I got. And so likewise you can see critical hit, determination, skill speed, and tenacity is on this one. And so now we're seeing skill speed instead of spell speed, and we're seeing tenacity instead of piety. Again, this is because when you're on a tank, you don't have spells. Paladin, most of them don't have spells. And so skill speed is what's going to impact how fast they attack in that, so you're not going to see spell speed there. And likewise, piety only impacts the MP regeneration rate of healers, and so you're seeing tenacity here, because likewise they are scaling upwards with more of this. One exception to both the King's Codex as well as these Warg Greaves of Fending is that you notice that there is nothing for direct hit rate. And I would be remiss to say that this isn't a skill, or rather a stat, that healers and tanks shouldn't care about, because I know many healers and many tanks that take direct hit rate. And yes, I did say healers. I know that a lot of people, especially those who are min-maxing and worried about how much healing is going on, are going to cringe and say, why not determination, because that impacts heals and damage. I'm just saying what I've seen, and honestly, sometimes it's really tempting to slot in more direct hit because it just scales so well. But again, that's for the stats video, last section. And so likewise, if I hover over these materia, could I technically put into my codex skill speed? Likewise, you can see if I hover over it that you can see it at the bottom. Absolutely, I totally could. I could also slot in direct hit rate, and you can see this little fifth one at the bottom left hand corner of the screen now pop up direct hit rate or skill speed. That's because technically you can add them, but likewise the system is kind of funneling you in this direction. Actually, in terms of direct hit rate, let's go into this facet Mail of Maiming. And so this is specifically Dragoon, which is a DPS gear. You can see critical hit, determination, skill speed, and direct hit rate. Direct hit rate is, as I said, something that you still want to see on tanks and healers in some cases, but it's kind of placeholder that's given to DPS. But I don't know, I'm thinking about how to best explain it. Direct hit rate, everyone cares about direct hit rate, everyone loves her. Direct hit rate is perfect, she's beautiful, she looks like a model. Oh, your smile looks beautiful. She could walk out there in a diaper and they go, oh, direct hit rate, your stats are beautiful. I think I'm actually going to leave that in, but everyone loves direct hit rate. But essentially, when I click a materia on this side, so let's click into this facet Mail of Maiming, and let's just slot in 2 of this determination plus 12. Another thing that you can see is the quantity, and you can see I have 102 of these, and so I prepared for this recording. And then you just can see that a new window pops up saying that, hey, we have a request for materia melding. It shows how poor I am. It shows how many quantity of materia here. It shows what type of materia I'm trying to slot it in. It shows me the gear, and that honestly it has nothing melded into it. This is a success rate. One thing that we will get into after I explain this baseline functionality is we're going to talk about success rate. So don't worry about that. When we're talking about NPC melds, it's going to be 100%. Don't worry about that yet. And it says a melding fee of 700 gil. Likewise, don't worry. This has just scaled up because likewise I am attaching this to a level 80 item level 450 piece of gear for a level 80 character. And so likewise, this fee is significantly higher. And if I want to meld this, I submit request, then I get that first materia in there. So likewise, if I hover over this gear, you can now see that it now has a bit more determination on it. Now it has plus 12 determination, which for the record is quite low. When we're looking at true endgame materia right now, we're juggling plus 60 per materia that we're putting in. Generally speaking, we'll get into that soon. But you can see that now that first slot is filled with a materia, and now let's go for that second one. Likewise, determination plus 12 again, and now we have 2 materia slotted into this piece of gear, this facet Mail of Maiming, which does determination plus 24. And likewise, determination, again, like if you want to recap on what that does, go to that stats video, but it's just going to be a flat increase of damage here. And so we just gave ourselves a flat increase of damage of all of our damage that we deal. And so this is a huge perk, and it definitely allows a lot of customization of your character. Now, I want to show a few other pieces of gear because I think that this is going to be very important. Such as look at these elemental trousers of maiming, or elemental shoes of maiming. These are pretty unique because as you can see if I scroll up and down my inventory, you usually see 2 slots. But for these have 5. There are specific weapons and armor pieces that do have 5 slots by default. And so these are usually relic weapons, or they are relic armor pieces, such as if I bring up my character sheet and hover over my Brilliance Bow, you can see that I have 5 different materia slots in here. And likewise, I have slotted it in with 2 critical hit materia, giving me plus 120 crit, and then 3 direct hit materia, which is, what is that, 12, and then 180 more direct hit rate. That probably took me so long. People are gonna totally think I'm stupid. Maybe I should edit that out, but I'll keep it real. I'll keep it real. But basically, you can see that you have just different slots for different pieces of gear. And likewise, let me fill up a piece of gear with just different materia. Like, let's do determination plus 12 in this Ruby Con Smalls once, and then let's do it twice. Now you can see I can try and add a third one technically to this. And this is the next system that we want to talk about. But for this, it says success rate. You cannot affix any more materia to this item. And so, how to say it? This item, if we hover over it, we can see over the tooltip that we still have that Rubicon Smalls is the name of it. We can see the item level, we can see the classes it's meant for, the bonuses, the materia, all these crafting and repair stuff. So now let's hover over the King's Codex. And so we can see a little thing here called Advanced Melding Forbidden. And so if you see the bonuses with Vitality, Mind, Critical Hit, and Piety, just above that, you can see this little section saying Advanced Melding Forbidden. What we can do with certain pieces of gear is that we can do something called over melding them, where we can slot more than the baseline number of slots of materia into that particular piece of gear. And over melding is something that is definitely seen with the highest end raiders. It is definitely something that is very prominent in this game. This is something that makes crafted gear very lucrative. because one thing about Advanced Melding Forbidden is that you will never be able to slot a third materia into this King's Codex, or a fourth or a fifth. You are limited to these 2 slots. And likewise, if I bring up my characters page, look at this Eden Choir Chapeau of Aiming. You can see it also says Advanced Melding Forbidden, and this is a piece of raid drop gear. I can only ever have these 2 slots, ever. And likewise, if I hover over something like, let's look at these Augmented Crystarian Breaches of Aiming. This is from Tomestones. Don't worry if that doesn't make sense, I will get into that in a future video. But this also says Advanced Melding Forbidden. So likewise, 2 materia slots on this. I will never put a third materia in this. I can never. It's not that I don't even want to, because trust me, if I could, trust me, I'd want to. But this will never, ever have a third, fourth, or fifth materia in it. It's just not possible. But now let's bring up some other pieces of gear. Right now we are looking at the Militia Sublegar here. And likewise, you can see Advanced Melding is not actually forbidden with this one. And likewise, you can see that we are going to be able to slot in 2 different materia in here. And so likewise, I need to actually introduce the concept of overmelding here. So let's try and just slot in materia into this. Let's try and have this materia melder slot in more than 1 materia, or more than 2 materia, I mean. And so this NPC, as you can tell, actually isn't willing to do that. And so what this gets into is the fact that players can actually slot materia into their own gear. And so this is a system that is very much dependent on what particular level your crafters are at. So if I open up my Disciple of Hand and Disciple of Land, basically that's the way that we talk about crafters. Don't worry, I will totally get into those systems in future videos, promise. But Disciples of Hand, I have all of them to 80, and generally speaking, the level that the crafters are depicts what kind of, or what level of gear that you can actually slot materia into. Such as if you have like level 1 blacksmiths and like everything's level 1, you aren't going to be able to slot into like level 80 gear. It's a system that very much depends on exactly what that particular piece of gear says. Like if I hover over my Brilliance Bow, it says Materia Melding is Disciple of the Hand level 80. So I need at least 1 crafting class to level 80. So what I can do right now is that I am going to open up my inventory actually and go to that Militia Sublegar. And then I can go and put in meld request. Then I can click on Determination +1. And so this system says that I have 2 materia in it, and then it has a success rate button, or not button, but a menu here saying 90% with there is a chance that this meld may fail. And so that Materia Melder NPC will never fail his melds, and likewise for any slots, these baseline slots, like this one has 2 baseline slots, those will never fail. That's why you see things like my Brilliance Bow has all grade 8 materia, which is fairly expensive, especially for a newer player. Very expensive actually, I will say, especially for a newer player. But what you can do in this instance is never worry about it for the baseline slots. But when you're talking about overmelding on gear that you can overmeld, because remember, the raid gear that I showed with Advanced Melding Forbidden, you can't do it. But with pieces of gear that you can have a crafter go and try and slot a materia. But whenever you're overmelding, there's a very good chance you can fail. So now, right now, I have a 90% chance of failing, and then if I hit the meld button, I can get a warning saying you're attempting to meld additional materia to an item. If you fail, you will lose the materia, and if I want to proceed. Likewise for this video, my wallet hurts a little bit from those cheap materia, but let's go for it. And so likewise, after trials and tribulations, it was a bit successful. I don't know how long the footage is going to actually be doing this, but now we have a 48% success rate because that third one was successful. So now we're trying to meld on a 4th materia, or we're trying to overmeld twice. So this is now down to a 48% chance. And so now just trying to go and do this to the materia. That's going to succeed, thankfully. Now we're down to overmelding number 5, with the success rate all the way down to 28%, and so that is pretty low. And for the record, these numbers, when you're dealing with higher level materia, get very, very, very low, and often you're going to hear a lot of different pieces of materia break. So now what I've just done is I have slotted in the 5th piece of materia, and likewise, if I'm looking at my materia melding screen for my character, you can see that the piece of gear is gone. I no longer can see it in there. That's because it's not even an option to meld at this point. So now if I close that menu and go to my inventory, if I look at this militia subligar, I can see it has 5 determination plus 1 materials in it. And so I have those 2 baseline slots that you can see in the green, and likewise they have a blue dot in them. And that's, I guess, how they just show that those are the baseline materia. And then you see these 3 red dots, and likewise they don't have a green circle. And so this means that these red ones are all of the overmelded materia on top of this militia subligar. Now, I want to hover over things like, actually, I almost forgot something important. You cannot overmeld past 5 materia. 5 materia is the maximum number of materia offered on any particular piece of gear. Doesn't matter if it's weapon, doesn't matter if it's armor. I have never seen a piece of gear ever go to 6 slots. Relic armor actually was quite shocking back in the day when it was first rolled out. Actually, relic weapons too, where you could actually slot 5 materia. People's minds were like, and likewise, that's something that definitely made the relic sets very, very, thinking about the right word, very lucrative to a lot of people, because depending on how you want to take your playstyle, like let's say that you're a tank that just wants to completely stack tenacity, and I mean there are pros and cons of that. I now, oh god, I can see the min-maxers and people saying that is a horrible idea, but you know what, in some situations for some players, especially if you are considering going into a very heavy high damage fight like the ultimate raids, you might want that 10% extra mitigations or something. So let's say that someone wants to do that, or let's say that you are trying to go for the ultimate skill speed build, like the fastest samurai in all of the land. I can imagine total RP opportunities with that. But basically all those 5 slots, so you'd get it on like the bow, you get on the 5 armor pieces, so boots, legs, gloves, body, and head, and so you get 5 times 5 is 25, so you'd get 30 materia slots just from those 6 pieces of gear. So that's pretty good. And then you have extra 2 for hands and blah blah blah. And so actually that might be a fun exercise to do. So let's say that we have bow with 5, hat with 5, so 10, 15 with the body, 20 with the gloves. Waist will only have 2. The most material I've seen on a waist piece so far, unless it's a crafted piece, is going to be 2. But let's say 5 here. Let's go with all 5. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we have 12 times 5 materia. And so I'm actually going to have to pull up my... Actually, no, I'm not going to have to. That's 60 different materia. This is going to be a lot of secondary stats that you're able to actually slot into gear. But one thing that you noticed that I was wanting to say but actually stopped myself because I was like, oh yeah, that system works that way, is that initially people might be like, okay, we have 60 materia, and then I see these grade 8 materia, and so this means that I can slot plus 60 for a particular substat a total of 60 times. And so 60 multiplied by 60, fairly large number, pretty good, right? But unfortunately the reality is that overmelding does not allow you to always do that. And so let's pull up an example. I'm going to try and slot gear with you and cry over my bank account with you. So now that my wallet has been thoroughly violated, I have bought a Neo Ishgardian Top of Healing just for this video. So now I'm going to go and hit the meld option. Actually, let's go all the way with this. Let's go to that NPC because I don't think that many newer players are going to do that. So I'm going to Materia Melding. I am then opening up my inventory and selecting this wherever I put it. So I'm changing over to the head, body, hands armory chest, and likewise I can see this Neo Ishgardian top of healing. So I want to slot in skill speed plus 60 materia. Yes, that means I cheaped out. And so I am going to click that materia and hit submit request. It says it'll charge me 1,600 gil. The things I do for you people. I'm joking, it's worth it. But I'm doing skill speed again, and so I have 2. And so you saw that those were those baseline slots, and so I filled up those 2 slots with them. Now I want to go to skill speed plus 60. Oh, you can't affix any more materia to this item. Well, we knew that from before because I said that the baseline slots we can't actually do that for. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to actually take that piece of armor from my inventory, and then I am going to hit the meld option, because as we said before, we can only do over melding with a crafter. And so likewise, I can select skill speed, and then it warns me 17% that there's a significant chance this meld will fail. And likewise, I'm now trying desperately to get it to meld, and likewise, this is definitely painful and definitely scary, but worth it for demonstration. Now what you noticed is that we have, at this point, succeeded in getting one of these materia in here. So what I want to do is try and add a 4th one. And what you're going to notice is that we just hit a wall. That now our success rate is 0%. And this is going to be special for grade 8 materia, where you can slot in grade 8 materia into any base slot. So things like my Brilliance Bow, I'm just going to hover back over it. You can see that these are all grade 8 materia. Any baseline slot can get a grade 8 materia, without question. So likewise, this Neo Ishgardian top of healing has the 2 materia in it, the grade 8 materia. But what you see is that this 3rd materia here was also grade 8 materia. So what you can do is you can do baseline melds and then the first and only the first over meld materia. Only the first over meld, not the 3rd. I mean, yeah, not the 2nd, not the 3rd materia over meld. So only the first over meld. So like take this piece of gear. Say I did skill speed plus 60, skill speed plus 60, then I did like a lower materia with like skill speed plus 20 or something. I still couldn't do a skill speed plus 60 because it's only the first overmeld period. I am too poor to do that experiment all the time. But basically, first overmeld can do the max materia. Not the other ones, only the first one. And so what you'll not very commonly see players do is that they will take materia like this Determination plus 12 materia, the Savage Might materia 5, and then they'll try and slot that in. And likewise, you can see that this can add more materia, but it has a 10% chance of failure. And actually this gets into another thing, that when you are trying to slot in materia, that you, as a reminder, just are not able to add any more past a certain particular limit on that particular stat. So if I did choose to go with this Determination plus 0 materia, or how to say it, this Determination plus 12 materia is what the materia is meant to do, but this would only add plus 0. So this materia would have basically no effect. Even if it succeeded, it would not add more determination because I'm already at this item's cap. And so likewise, this Neo Ishgardian type of healings cap is 438 secondary stat. And so I'm not allowed to add any more of that stat. And so likewise, this prevents people from being like, oh, I'm gonna absolutely maximize everything in terms of like tenacity to like untold levels. And so this is why you see things like the stat charts on acmorning.com not go up to like 6,000 tenacity or 6,000 crit. Will it one day? Probably. It might in the next, not the next patch, but the patch after that, when we get like new raid tier, we might really honestly see us hit that. We'll have to wait and see if that it'll potentially be bonkers, but I totally digress. And so just returning from here, the point that I really want to make is that the success rate goes down and down and down from here. So now that I have quote-unquote succeeded in getting that determination materia into here, you can see that if I hover over that piece of armor, you can see it says determination +0, which basically means that it's kind of a warning that you have completely gotten no benefit from this materia and you suck. Or I suck because I paid good gil for this. But even if I hover over all of my gear, you can see that I have a very fine balance of things. Like I have critical hit +60s, direct hit +60s. You can see I have some determination in some places, and that generally speaking, unless you really want that stat, it is generally better to get the full effect, the full say +60 out of a materia, than to only get like +12 or +3 out of it. Like even if your focus is crit, +3 crit is very rarely going to be better than +60 determination or +60 tenacity even. It's going to be like, you want to make sure that you get the most bang for your buck, or the most bang for your materia, literally in this case. And so definitely that's something to be quite aware of. Actually, a note from me during editing is that I actually forgot to specify something super important during this part. So right now I have a market board open with a whole bunch of materia here. But right now we're looking at the Savage Might materias. In particular, I'm hovering over 8 right now. There's something important in this materia tooltip that says base item level 420. I know the comment section is going to have fun with that. Then we have Savage Might materia 7, item level 420. Then I hover on to the 6th and it says item level 290. 5th is going to be item level 160, 4th item level 70, 3rd 45, 2 for 30, and 1 for 15. So this is very important to specify, is that I don't want people to get the wrong impression from this video that, hey, as a level 2 character on my Marauder, I can now suddenly rock all these determination materials and just blow through content like it's nothing. In fact, you're not going to be able to probably even use the first level of materia because it requires even item level 15. So it's not even on the table for you. So one thing about this is that the higher level you get, the higher level materials you can do. So item level 15, and I realize that these item levels are not specifically like your character level. Like for instance, we don't have a 420 level cap yet. We're currently only at a cap of 80. So these are specifically like for horizontal progression for gear, where gear progression can go way past just your base character level. And so this first one, you need at least item level 15 to even slot your first materia. And generally speaking, would I even recommend you worry about materia until end game? No, not really. Unless you're you have a bunch of materia sitting around and you're looking to level an alt class and you really want to boost its stats. I can definitely say I've done that. So that's definitely something that you can consider. But one thing is take, for instance, this item level 420. So what happens, especially with overmelding, is that the higher the grade of materia, so this is grade 8 materia, the higher the likelihood that it's going to fail for a particular slot. Such as if I took that materia 8 and I tried to overmeld a piece of gear with say a lower level materia, you're going to get a much higher chance that you can actually successfully melt that. I'm going to just pull up a piece of gear right now, and let's choose this Facet Mail of Maiming. Let's go into meld, and then let's try and slot this critical hit +60. And so this is a grade 8 materia, and so it's a 17% chance of succeeding. So pretty good chance of failing. Now I'm going to choose that same one, and now let's look at the other materia. So this is the 7th grade of materia. Again, this is a very, very high chance of failing, and this is because both of these materia, this 7 and 8, are of item level 420. So now I want to look at what other materia can do, or their percentages. So let's specifically look at this quick arm materia one, which I know is comically low level. This is the item level 15, but I think that'll help to show just how the system has the percentages different. So if you look at this, this is a 90% chance of succeeding. Now contrast that to if I say wanted to slot in like this Battle Dance Materia 7 with Tenacity plus 20. We're all the way back down to 17%. And so definitely the lower item levels that you go, the higher the chance that the overmelt's going to succeed, generally speaking. And this is why you will sometimes see a lot of players have like in their overmelt like plus 60, plus 60, plus 60 for those baselines, but you're gonna notice some of them are gonna go down to like really low item level materia for the last slots, just so that they can tweak and get the little last bit of stats that they can get out of that piece of gear. But anyhow, back to the original program. Just want to make sure that I specified this. But now we've gone to the part of the video where I want to talk about removing materia from gear. And so likewise, a lot of people are probably thinking like, oh my gosh, materia is something expensive, it's something that I don't want to waste, and I'm gonna have to upgrade gear, aren't I, and blah blah blah, horizontal progression system. And that's a very valid concern. It's like, fundamentally, over time, you're gonna change gear, you're gonna get better things, you're gonna change loot, you might want different substats, you might go after one best in slot gear with samurai with like super skill speed, you might want to go after another one with lower skill speed, and that's totally fine. So we have a system where we can basically reclaim materia. So if I go over the Neo Ishgardian Top of Healing, and then I go to the Retrieve Materia option, instead of Meld Retrieve Materia, I can now click that. And likewise, I have a success rate of 100%, which is successful retrieval is guaranteed. But one thing I want to say very clearly about this system is look at where that check mark is. That is on the last slot that we just filled in. And so whenever you're retrieving materia, you cannot choose something like the top materia or the second materia. It will always go to the last materia that was slotted into this piece of gear. And so likewise, with 100% with successful retrieval is guaranteed, that's pretty good. So let's go ahead and do that. And then it gave me, as I'm recording, insufficient inventory space. No, don't tell me that. So I'm gonna actually do, now I'm gonna do retrieve materia, and then get a little noise, and yay, we retrieved the materia. But now here's where things get spicy. So you remember those grade 8 materias? Those ones are the newest, the best, the brightest, the coolest materia to have. They add the most stats. Now, for this last slot, which is our third slot, which is the one that we overmelded, it has a 40% chance of succeeding, so 60% chance of failing. Likewise, let's do it up and try and get it. And for the record, my RNG is horrible, and if you were looking for suffering, likewise, there. And you can see that sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. But in general, how to say it, it's like every shot that you don't take is a miss. It's just like when you're looking to upgrade your gear, or say for relic weapons, I'll eventually have a relic guide weapon because I've done so many of them. In fact, I'm shocked I haven't gotten one up sooner, really. But basically, with like a relic weapon, like this Brilliance Bow, I know that I'm going to have to trade this weapon in. And likewise, I want to at least have a chance at getting back these critical hit and direct hit rate materials. I want them back because you know what? I don't wanna lose them. It's just like, I'd rather get one materia back than none, because I traded in the bow with the materia and then I'm like, oh well, that was stupid of me. It's just like, it's always better to take a chance, even if it's low. So don't take the failure as being a bad thing. It's just like, at least we have an option now, because once upon a time it wasn't quite an option. So let's be happy that we have this option. It'd kind of be a little busted, wouldn't it, if we always had 100% success rate, but thankfully we at least have 40. Now I want to take a brief moment to talk about where to even get materia, because I think that it would be a little cruel to leave that out of this video. But materia, as probably most people who have come across this video have experienced, comes from a whole lot of sources. It can come from things like the hunt. It can come from things like if you do the leveling roulette as the role that's wanted, like if you're a tank or a healer or a DPS and they want like DPS, then you go in and then you can do that. And so that's going to be specifically leveling roulette or alliance roulette. And I mean, if you're a DPS, that one very often has DPS as the wanted role, and then you get 2 cracked Plana clusters and 1 cracked Stella cluster, and likewise you can trade these in for the grade 8 and grade 7 materia, so those are the really expensive ones. And then even through dungeoning, you can just stumble across treasure chests that will randomly give you random materia, and this is how sometimes my inventory gets junked up with some of the materia that I really don't want. And we'll cover systems shortly, very shortly, in like a minute, of how you can trade them in. But basically there are just a ton of different sources of materia. It's like materia is not that scarce to come by, and it's just like, why do I say that the grade 8 materia are expensive though? Because most people are trying to consume it, and that really the materia prices kind of really fluctuate. Just depending on like, is there a new raid tier, or did a raid team complete it and now they're trying to get best in slot. Especially with like overmelding with crafted gear, you're going to notice that the materia prices are going to spike. Hint hint, if you want to make gil. I don't make my gil that way, as you can see I'm broke as can be, but there's definitely a huge spike in demand when there's a new raid tiers, because likewise there's a new crafted set, and as you can put together from this video, people want to do pentamelds, which is the 5 slots in the crafted gear, just so that they can push their stats to the absolute apex limit that they possibly can. And likewise, that's mostly for hardcore endgame raiders, and I don't want to scare people off though, so don't worry about that if that's not what you're doing. But I can say, like, have I pentamelded? Absolutely. I can even pull up old tank gear from last expansion that I pentamelded because I was doing a little bit of competitive raiding, and it was fun. It was worth it. I likewise will probably not throw out this gear, even though maybe I should. I guess I'm a digital hoarder. Crap, it's gonna be a series online, isn't it? Darn it, I gave myself up. But basically, don't worry too much about getting material. You're gonna get a lot of it, and it comes from a whole lot of different sources. Look at things like the hunts, just do dungeons, just do questing, do some of your roulettes, just really play the game, and you're gonna come through a lot. Also, the market board is a really good source of material. It tends to be the source that I lean heaviest into. Oh god, this is why I'm poor. So I just was referring to a system where you can take trash materia and you can do something with them. So let's say that you have a whole bunch of piety materia and you really don't want to sell them, you don't like them, or like lower level material, and you're just like, I don't need this, I really just want grade 8 material. Okay, perfect, fine. There's a system where you can trade those in and potentially get a chance at a better materia. And so this is called Materia Transmutation, and no spoilers, but you follow a quest line called Marvelously Mutable Materia. And so you go to Blackbrush Station in Central Thanalan, and then up to the map, and you will get across a very strange gobby. And his name is Mutamix Bubbly Pots. And no, that is literally his name. And so what this system does is it allows you to trade in a bunch of your different materias that you don't want, well, I assume that you don't want, and have a good chance of getting another materia. And it might even have a chance of increasing in level. Like if you traded a whole lot of like level 1 materia, you might get a level 2 materia. If you traded a whole lot of level 3 materia, you might get a level 4 materia. But the chance is not actually that massively high. So let's say that I select 5 of this particular determination, the Savage Might materia. I almost said determination materia because that's more what my brain clicks with as the stat. But you can select up to 5 of that materia, and then likewise the Materia Transmutation menu is going to say 5 out of 5, Savage Might materia 5, hit the confirm button, and then it asks if you're sure. Mutamix Bubbly Pots is going to say Mixy Melt, Melty Mix, Squash and Squeeze, Squeeze and Squash. Oh my. And then likewise the whatever that is. makes a bunch of stars with a thunk, and then basically you get a new materia. And so likewise, will this necessarily always be the most profitable thing? Sometimes. I definitely know some people who have used the system to take a whole bunch of garbage materia. Like, they just go through the entire market board, they buy out all of the materia that they possibly can, and then they take this materia to Mutamix, and then they turn it into materia that is extremely valuable. And likewise, probably the most valuable materia is crafter and gatherer materia, because they are a little bit more tricky to get, if I'm being super honest, than Disciple of War, Disciple of Magic materia. Like, we've talked so far and been very focused so far in the new player guide on combat, because combat is going to lead you through things like the main story quest. But when we're talking about gatherers and crafters, they also have their own secondary stats and primary stats that they focus on, and likewise, their materia is very, very lucrative to get. So I know people who have made millions of gil just transmuting materia, and so Mutamix bubbly pots is like one of their best friends. And so likewise, I'm pretty sure that they would hurt me if I didn't bring this up in the new player materia guide. And so there are a whole lot of options. And so likewise, that wraps up the materia guide of the new player guide or returning player guide. And so even if you're not new or returning, I think that this is a system where there's just a few different aspects in it. And so I hope that a lot of people, even if they aren't new or just returning, learned something from this, because I know a lot of people don't even know about overmelding, or they don't know what the stats do. They're just like, what does tenacity do? And trust me, that is a very common question, because some people really just think it does damage reduction. It does flat damage increase and damage reduction to a good level. But I digress. But yeah, do you have any questions, concerns? Is there anywhere that you want to see me take this guide? Is there anything confusing you about materia? Or maybe you just want to say how you made millions using Mutamix bubbly pots and how you're going to give me some gil. No? Darn it. Well, you can't blame someone for trying, right? Anyhow, thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, if you like this video and you want to help support the channel, please consider smashing that like button and annihilating that subscribe button. I need some kind of pretty graphic for that. I definitely need some kind of pretty graphic for like annihilation or something. We've just heard so many people say it for years that it's so hard to say it seriously, but I'm gonna cut this video short. Thank you all so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and I hope that you genuinely have a fantastic day. Truly, thank you so very much. Catch you in the next one.